All right. We are live. Good morning, everybody. Well, not morning everywhere, but if it's morning where you are, good morning. Good day if it's not. I'm coming to you from the lodge in West Virginia, and we're going to be talking about uh, the kind of shenanigans that the Iranians were engaging in during the recent conflict in order to try to divide Americans. Now, I talked about uh, some of the asymmetric war possibilities yesterday and got a lot of interesting feedback from people on that. A lot of people feel like talking about asymmetric war is going to make it worse, like give state actors ideas, and we don't want to do that. Of course, we don't ever want to tell bad people things they don't need to know. However, that's I don't believe that's the case. There's nothing that I'm sharing in any of these broadcasts that is classified or not public domain information. So as long as it's public domain, that means it's already out there. And believe me, if there's a state actor like Iran, they've got people who whose job it is to comb social media and find stuff and look it up. So it's not like we're sharing things that bad people don't need to know. Now, there is an argument to be made that you could say, well, yes, but you're teaching civilians things that maybe they don't know, and they could possibly, commit copycat attacks or something like that. We don't know much more about what happened in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, day before yesterday. So far, they're saying that the deceased shooter that they encountered on the mountain was the guy who started the forest fire. It was a 20-year-old kid. One person yesterday said he was born in Russia. I haven't been able to find that anywhere else. It just looks like a typical American incel. And, incels are so common in America today. It's really an epidemic. And we should talk more about incels, I think, because if you have young men in your life, whether that's your son, your grandson, your, uh, I don't know, brother, you need to be aware of this problem. And the problem is like this. I see this. It's so unfortunate, but I see it so often everywhere I go, maybe because I've studied it. But what you see today in America is young men who are completely buried in their phone at all times. We went out to a beautiful waterfall the other day when my kids were here. We took a hike. We hiked out to a spot where there was a incredible waterfall and a nice little swimming hole where you could jump in and go swimming. And we all jumped in and went swimming. There were a couple of other families there that were enjoying it as well. And I noticed that there was this, I don't know, 16 to 18-year-old kid sitting on a rock over there. His parents had driven, they didn't hike in, but they'd driven up and parked over there. And this kid was sitting on a rock for the entire hour we were there swimming, just looking at his phone. And some of the most beautiful natural scenery you could find, this kid's just buried in his phone. And it's so sad. It's just so sad. But there are some really dangerous problems that come from that. This epidemic of young men that are sort of detached from real life, don't have relationships per se. They spend a lot of time alone in the United States. As it becomes more and more common for uh, this kind of behavior for young men to have the majority of their interactions over the phone. I think we're going to see more and more of this kind of the outgrowth of this, which is violent lashing out. Apparently, this kid had tried to get on the fire department and failed, and was angry about that. So he went out and set a fire and then ambushed the firefighters when they came to put it out. And that's incredibly tragic. But I think the saddest part about that is this was a good looking kid, 20 years old. He has his whole life ahead of him. And what is it? You cannot convince me that so many young men that are willing to just completely throw their lives away, like the guy that shot those two people leaving the Jewish event in Washington, D.C. He ruined he's 30 years old, ruined his entire life. Just done. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. Why is it that these young men are so willing to throw their lives away like this? Because when they get sideways about something, they get all up in arms about something. Well, I would submit to you that this is demonic. This is demonic oppression. And that's my opinion, but I really believe it is. However, it is being magnified, multiplied around the world by bad actors. And Iran is one of those bad actors, without a doubt. So the report that came out, let's see if I can find it. Iran has their digital army. So they have about 500,000 men under arms in their conventional military forces. It's the largest military in the Middle East. And they're not expeditionary, so they can't really threaten anybody except their immediate neighbors. However, they have likely 100,000 or more digital warriors who are running botnets across the internet and just committing shenanigans everywhere they can. And what this report from the IDF shows is that Iran mounted a comprehensive campaign to undermine the American public and its support for military action against Iran's nuclear facilities. And the way they did that is they deployed a very sophisticated bot network that disseminated hundreds of thousands of deceptive messages, amplified dissenting voices, and tried very hard to get Americans against the war. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what group of people was most likely to be against bombing Fordo, the United States getting involved in decimating the nuclear capabilities of Iran? Who was the most against that? Guys like Matt Gaetz, who is a really slimy creature, I have to say. I mean, I agree with him on a lot of things. He's he's definitely a conservative, but he's a very unpleasant conservative, to say the least. Kind of like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I've met Marjorie. And I interviewed her. She was kind enough, in the interview, and it was fine, just on a personal level. But when she gets in front of a camera, she turns into a very unpleasant person. And I don't think that is profitable in the long run. I don't think that brash, angry, in your face, to heck with the whole world kind of politics is profitable in the long run. I would much rather see people who are studied and thoughtful and spirit led. Would that be too much to ask? And polite to a fault. My friend Clay Higgins is that way. He's a congressman from Louisiana. And Clay Higgins is one of the most unfailingly polite people you will ever meet. Now, he was a cop and he could certainly turn it on when he needed to. He's also into boxing and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all that. So, he's a warrior. But and this is the thing that I notice is that people who are well-read, intelligent, thoughtful, godly, they can tear you apart 9 ways from Sunday, and they don't have to be rude to do it. They can politely and gracefully show people where they are wrong, point out what needs to happen or what shouldn't happen, and they don't have to be crass and just, angry about it. Look, I heard somebody say, a friend of mine, yesterday, that we only have two parties in America. We have the evil party and we have the stupid party. And sometimes they get together and work together on something and do something truly evil and stupid. And that's called bipartisanship. What we really need is a party that's based on goodness and thoughtfulness, um, and all the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self control. Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if you could watch C-SPAN and watch our House of Representatives debating a bill without people doing all this performative anger for the cameras? See, it used to be that way. It used to be there used to be this thing called decorum, and that's largely been lost in our society. And because that has been lost in our society, not just by our politicians, but by the rest of us as well, our adversaries are able to drive a wedge between us and capitalize on that lack of decorum, on that lack of grace, to drive us further apart. And as I said, if you look at the voices that were most vociferous for not intervening in Iran, something that should have probably been done 40 years ago, and we would not have near the problems in the Middle East today that we have if that were the case. Well, if Iran mounted a comprehensive campaign to undermine American public support for the military in general and military action against nuclear facilities by deploying this sophisticated bot network. This is the thing. Now we have hundreds of thousands of artificial intelligence fake accounts that are being ordered to, or being commanded to, drive a wedge between the American people. And I'm going to keep harping on this. You might think I'm talking about this a lot lately, but I'm going to keep talking about it because it's a big deal. And we need to be aware of it, and we need to resist it every way we can. One of the ways we do that is by having this kind of a chat back and forth. And like yesterday on our locals page, we had, I don't know, 50 people on a Zoom call. And we got to talk about these things, and I got to hear from you and discuss better than we can in this format where you can type and I can talk. It was really actually nice to kind of ask you some questions and get your feedback and hear where you're coming from on those issues. By the way, if you want to get on the next call with me, our supporters over there have access to those calls. So you just go to chuckholton.com. You can become a supporter. It's $9 a month. Buy me a couple coffees and, help to support the work that I do uh, in journalism and in the humanitarian work that I do. And everybody's happy. You also get a lot of extra content in terms of articles that we write and summaries of these lives we put out and books and documentaries and all sorts of things like that. So I would encourage you to go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. It does really help. I mean, if you want to support what we're doing, it does really help. We've got a lot of people to support here now, not just I think we're up to 102 or maybe 106 women that we're supporting in Cartagena, Colombia. Some of them are in prison and are, when you go to prison in Colombia, you don't get anything but the bare minimum basics, rice and beans. That's about it. So if you're a woman, you don't get toothpaste, you don't get shampoo, you don't get feminine products, you don't get any of that provided to you. And so what we're doing is we started a ministry to provide dignity kits for these women. And we have another group of women who used to be in prison with them that's now been set free that goes into the prison with a church that we're affiliated with over there that we support. And they distribute these dignity kits to all the women in the prison, and then they preach to them. They bring in a pastor and they preach to them. And many of those women are getting saved in prison. We are changing lives. And all of this is we're only able to do it because of you and you guys supporting our work. So thank you for those of you who do that. Question from Live Animal. How likely is it that the firefighters were targeted in Idaho because Iran might try to create wildfires and cause terror amongst firefighters? Well, so we know that this is a tactic that's being used by terrorists in the United States and elsewhere, especially in Israel. Palestinians in Israel now, that's kind of their favorite thing to do. If they're not throwing rocks off overpasses at passing cars, they just go out and start fires, which just destroys. It doesn't really do anything to win the war, but this is one of the reasons why Palestinians can't have nice things. Is that when your whole worldview is wrapped up with just going and destroying, then you don't get to have nice things. So yes, it very well could be a what we call asymmetric war event in the United States. I firmly believe that some, at least, of the wildfires that we've seen in the past year were due to asymmetric war from either Iranians or Russians in the United States. And they don't have to be carried out by Iranians or Russians. You understand that, right? There are lots of people that are willing to do pretty much anything for money. I mean, just look at the popularity of sites like OnlyFans and things like that. There are a lot of people out there that don't have much in the way of scruples who, for a little bit of money, would go start a fire someplace. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. So, as a matter of fact, where was it? I think in France. No, Germany. They just arrested a an Iranian a guy who he was an Arab. He wasn't an Iranian, but He was living in Germany and he was spying for Iran for money. And they just caught him. I just saw that go by the news feed today. Israel itself has had problems with Israeli citizens taking money from Iran to do shenanigans like take pictures of sensitive sites or, uh, you know, move a package from here to there, uh, pay money to somebody or whatever, and they do all this for money. Some of these are just kids, teenagers that have been caught doing this for Israel. So, I'm sorry, for Iran in Israel. As a matter of fact, the last time I was in Israel, I was up in the north, right near the northern border, and I was making a story about the area. So I wanted to get, I was driving and I saw a sign that was the name of the furthest north village in Israel, up there in the Panhandle. So I stopped to get a little bit of video of that sign for my story. And as I was doing that, there was a truck coming. And so I was watching, I was trying to get it like 10 seconds of video of this sign. And I cut it off just before the truck crossed into my shot. And then I, turned around and walked back to my car. This truck locked up the brakes, turned around, came back. Two soldiers jumped out, drew down on me. Freeze! What are you doing? All yelling at me, right? And I was like, dude, guys, hold on. What are you filming us for? I wasn't filming you. I was just filming that sign. Why are you filming? It's because I'm a journalist. Here's my press credentials. I'm, registered. I'm an official here in Israel. I can do this. I'm allowed to go around and make television. And these guys were a couple of IDF soldiers of some sort, but they detained me and kept me there for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes while they called their commander and, tried to figure out what they should do with me and everything. And I'm just like, guys, I get it. You're jumpy and everything, but I'm an American. Like, you can tell I'm an American. I'm not going to be, I'm on your side here. Look, you can just Google my name. Just look me up and you'll see. And finally, that's what they did. They Googled my name and they were like, oh, okay, well, it looks like you're all right. And they let me go. Now, I don't hold it against them for being suspicious because, like I say, there are people running around Israel. Some of them are actually Israeli citizens that are taking money from Iran to spy for them, essentially. So they got to be careful. And we do too. The thing is, you have this normalcy bias that says this kind of thing doesn't happen in America. And so when you see something that might be a little out of the ordinary, you just kind of write it off to, well, free country. I don't know what that guy's doing over there, but whatever. The problem is, that's because we live in a high trust society. We have inherited a high trust society from our ancestors here in America. They built for us a safe, stable, polite society that has high trust. So when you see somebody off on the side of the road, you don't think anything of it, anything nefarious is going on. If you see somebody broken down on the side of the road, you don't immediately think that could be an ambush. If you are standing in a bus stop, you don't watch the cars going by and think one of these cars might be ready to, plow into me and do a ramming attack, because those sorts of things typically don't happen in a high trust society. The problem is we are losing that status. We're not as much of a high trust society as we used to be, as we are. If you're my age or older, you remember what a high trust society felt like. And it's likely that you still kind of go around your day-to-day life and believe that America is that same high trust society you grew up in, but it's not. Look, I didn't have the video to put up here, but I I saw a video today from Washington D.C. There's a nice park that I've visited several times when I've been there, and it's a beautiful place in downtown DC. There's a little arch, it looks like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and it's the Gay Pride, week, month, whatever they have, and so there was a massive crowd down there, and there I don't know if there was a big brawl or if they got tear gassed or something, but there were just people fleeing in panic, running all over the place, scantily dressed, looking very um, just immoral, let's say, and trash everywhere. I mean, but besides the fact that it looks like a riot is happening, and there are those, just trash everywhere, just so much trash. That is indicative of a low trust society. I went to Lowe's yesterday. I go to Lowe's a lot. When I'm here at the lodge, because I'm always working on stuff, and I went to buy some Romex electrical wire to put in the cabin we're working on, and everything was locked up behind a cage. So I had to go get a guy and bring him over, and he had to unlock the cage and get the wire out. But he couldn't just give me the wire. He had to carry it up to the front desk for me and watch me check out with it. That, my friends, is a low trust society. And again, going back to the theme of our live today, this is what Iran is exploiting, not just Iran, Russia, China, elsewhere. They are exploiting that here in the United States. And they may very well, to answer your question, a long roundabout answer, live animal. Yes, it is likely, it is possible that there was more to the attack in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, than just some incel kid who didn't make it on the fire department and was salty about it. There could be more to it than that, but we won't know because the kid is dead, unfortunately. Just like the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania is dead. So we won't know more about that, most likely, anytime soon either. But that's the kind of thing that our adversaries are doing. As I said yesterday, they are engaging in asymmetric warfare in many ways. But this bot army is one of the most common ways, because if they can talk us into destroying ourselves, then they won't need to have a expeditionary army that can come to America and invade us. If China can kill 100,000 Americans a year via by pumping fentanyl into our borders, imagine if we went to war with China and lost 100,000 soldiers. That'd be horrific. We haven't lost that many soldiers since World War II, but we're losing that many people every year until last year to fentanyl, which is a direct, intentional, asymmetric attack by China on our country. So don't do drugs, people. That's one way to, if there's no demand, that strategy would not work. But it's just unfortunate that it works so well. Okay, saw another question go by and it just snapped. Oh, crud. Missed it. Video games a huge part warping the minds of young men. They certainly are, and not just the fact that they're training young men to be violent and not have consequences for bad actions. You go play, what is that, Grand Theft Auto. The whole point of the game is to run around and commit felonies. And it's fun. And there's no consequences for that in the real world. Well, the consequences are that you start to believe that there are no consequences when you do something for real, I believe. And that definitely is warping young men's minds. But more importantly than that, young men are hardwired to need to build and conquer. God gave us that desire. It's, again, hardwired into our DNA. And these video games satiate that need. If you can go sit and play a video game in the comfort of your basement, and you can build whole worlds, you can conquer things, you can win there, well, then what's the big deal about going out in everyday life? And look, this tremendously hurts my heart. It hurts my heart to say that as hard as I tried with my own kids, we didn't give them video games. We bought a farm and moved out to the country so that they'd have outdoor stuff to do. I literally wrote books to my children about avoiding passive activity, about getting out of the house and actually going out and doing your building and conquering in the real world rather than on the screen. And yet, even my boys struggled once they get out and they become an adult, and I don't have any say in the matter anymore. And I've watched them just flounder, spend 20 hours in a day on a video game. And eventually they seem to grow out of it and start to actually realize, oh, it's more fun to build in the real world. But they're stunted because I left home when I was 17. I was building and conquering and taking on the whole world. By the time I was 19 years old, I was a jump master. I was an Army Ranger. I had a Ranger tab. I was a team leader in the Ranger Regiment. I was in charge of a $100 million aircraft and 60 men's lives whenever we went to jump. At 19 years old. My sons, because of the availability of that medium where you can go and build and conquer and everything in the virtual world where it's absolutely worthless. There is no redeeming value whatsoever for a young man to spend the best years of his life, the years where he has the most energy and the most drive and the most testosterone, to go waste it looking at a screen. And when that happens, especially when that young man already has some responsibility in his life, when that happens, all he's doing is he's setting himself back day by day, month by month, year by year. I wrote an article about this in my book, Prowess. In the amount of time that the average young man spends playing video games in a year, he could literally learn Japanese. He could learn to code. I built an entire house with my bare hands in 90 days during the epidemic. 90 days. That's all it took me. Because I did it full time and just put my head down and worked like a dog, sun up to sundown for 90 days. And I built a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that is worth about $2,000 a month to my family in income. There's no reason at all why a 19-year-old kid couldn't do exactly the same thing. No reason. There's no reason at all that a 19-year-old kid couldn't invest his time wisely and be so many light years ahead of his peers that people would be beating down the door to get him to come work for them, because the ability to focus and hustle and do real man work is so rare anymore that it's all but a superpower. Now, I don't know how I got off on that, but you can tell that's something that I am passionate about, folks, without a doubt. It's not all about just, oh, you could be out there making money, oh, what's wrong with taking some time after work to kick back and play a little video game now and then. Well, for that very reason. Look, watching television is bad enough. I used to call that the electronic income reducer. But because it's just passive activity, you're just laying there, you're just taking it in. But video games are a step worse because they, like I said, satiate that need that men have to build and conquer. And it's much easier and cheaper fix for that desire that men have. You should be, if you're a man, you should be growing that desire. You should be fanning into flame that hunger to build and conquer, not throwing cold water on it by playing video games. This is why I have to laugh, because I'm getting a lot of people, a lot of companies reaching out to me now wanting to sponsor the podcast. And I'm trying to choose only products that I would actually use or that I could endorse. And some people obviously don't watch my podcast. They just send out messages to everybody that's got a podcast or a channel on YouTube that's big enough. Because I get people reaching out to me and saying, we'd like to sponsor your podcast and have you push our video game, some video game that we've made. I'm like, are you insane? Like, tell you what, you go watch 5 hours of my podcast and then come back to me and tell me if you think we're a fit. I doubt I'll hear from you again. Daniel Welch says, I guess we're wasting time watching you. Well, buddy, maybe you ought to be out there making some money. I don't know. I don't think that education is ever wasted. And I would like to think that the service I'm providing through these daily lives is educating you, making you a little bit more well-versed with what's going on around the world. If you feel like you're not getting educated and you're not learning anything, by all means, please go watch somebody else. Mike Silva asks, do you think the lack of spiritual faith in the family and communities is a reason for this? Lots of pride and perseverance. Well, I mean, that obviously is foundational to growing a good man. Being a person of faith makes you much more resilient in the face of hardship, makes you much more grace-filled and mature when it comes to your relationships. I'm often just astounded when I spend time with people who are not believers. I just went to a wedding this weekend, and there were some families there that were definitely not believers. And just the dysfunction that was just so evident in their families was really astounding. And we are surrounded by people who have similar worldviews to ours for the most part. And so we're kind of used to things, things work pretty well. But man, you get around people who don't share our worldview, their lives are a wreck. And that's because God ordained the world to work a certain way. And he even wrote a book with the rules in it that said, you want to have a good life? Here's the rules. If you decide you want to throw that out the window and do it your own way, well, you're free to do that, but uh, it's not going to turn out well for you, most likely. So now I do get people who are angry with me for some reason for taking sponsors at all, and I don't understand that. I assume that you mean to get paid when you go to work. You cash the checks that your employer gives you. This is my work, and I do try to get paid at it so I can keep doing it because I enjoy it. And I enjoy it with you. Now, all right, let's move on. I've got off on a couple of tangents there, but so just to recap what Iran was doing, this report came out from the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and what it revealed was Iran's coordinated propaganda effort during Operation Rising Lion, during the Israeli operation against Tehran. They flooded social media with 100,000 accounts, more than 250,000 posts that were intended to amplify dissenting voices and turn the American people against the war. And in some sense, they were successful. There was a good portion of people who were impacted by that. Now, the war's been over for a week almost, and there's still stuff blowing up in Tehran. I don't know if you saw that. And this, I've not been able to independently verify this, but there's a picture going around on social media. I'll show you what it looks like. Here's a picture. This is supposedly from Tehran, and it was a drone strike, apparently, on an IRGC meeting. So some more IRGC officials yesterday got shuffled off this mortal coil by a drone strike. And as Amir Tsarfati facetiously points out, I wonder who did that. It must have been Liechtenstein or Monaco or something. So that's interesting. Now, Iran has not admitted to this happening yet, but there is video out of it, of the aftermath. So again, not positive, but it looks like that actually happened. In another asymmetric warfare event, it has come out that Iranian hackers breached Donald Trump's inner circle, stealing more than 100 gigabytes of emails. The FBI is calling it a hostile foreign threat tied to retaliation for the U.S. airstrikes. And so this Iranian hacker group is threatening to release all those emails to the public, which, I mean, if they were my emails, I'd be like, go ahead. Don't care. You want to see my emails? Fine. I'm not discussing super sensitive topics in my emails. But this is, again, more asymmetric war, and we will see more of this. Now, I wanted to turn over to Gaza for a minute because there have been several reports going around. I made the mistake yesterday of listening to NPR for about 5 minutes. National Public Radio was reporting that the Israelis intentionally bombed a cafe where a bunch of people were enjoying the seaside and charging their phones and sipping lattes on the beach. And Israel just cynically bombed this cafe and killed 71 people. Well, first of all, so there was a bombing. There was something that happened there. And some people did die. Israel says they're looking into it. and they are adjusting their rules of engagement to ensure that this kind of thing does not happen at the hands of Israelis. However, Israel also released the audio recording of a phone call coming out of Gaza where the Gazans are saying Hamas is orchestrating these deadly events so that they can blame it on Israel. They are literally killing people, Palestinians, their own people, just so that they can weaponize those deaths against Israel. Israel apparently is not killing enough Palestinians to give Hamas the ammo they need to bash Israel in the public square. So Hamas is helping out with that, and they're killing Palestinians themselves. And that, again, this is from a audio recording of a phone call that came out of Gaza over the last few days and was translated. It's going around on social media. But in the case of this seaside cafe where people were sipping their lattes and, Israel just shelled the place and killed 71 people, there are a couple of problems I see with that. Number one, I thought Gazans were all starving and just living in squalor and misery. Are you telling me there's coffee shops open where I can go sit by the seaside and get a latte? Okay, I mean, believe it or not, if you look, there are videos floating around out there of Gaza today that show you there are still stores open. As a matter of fact, I have a map here of Gaza, and I want to go to the map now because I want to show you uh, how much of Gaza the IDF has control over. The IDF controls the yellow portions of Gaza here. And you can see that equates to about 60% of the total area of Gaza. But there's still a lot of areas that the IDF does not control. The people are getting squeezed into smaller and smaller areas. So Hamas, hiding among the people, is going to get more and more desperate, more and more violent. As they do, more and more civilians are going to die, because if Hamas shoots at the IDF from the cover of a crowd of people, the IDF will likely shoot back. Now, I don't know exactly what their rules of engagement are at this moment when it comes to something like that. I think the rules of engagement are that IDF troops have been told to keep crowds of people away from their positions so that they don't get into that situation. Does that make sense? Look, I had this happen during the invasion of Panama back 100 years ago. On Christmas Day, 1989, I was in Panama during the invasion with the Army Rangers, and we got given a mission to go to the airport in David, which I thought was cool, the city of David, on Christmas Day. That was fun. And take over the airfield up there. Now, we had been told that there were some holdouts from the Noriega administration who were loyal to him up there, and they had some arms caches and that sort of thing. So we were supposed to go take over the airfield. And we flew a company of Rangers up there in helicopters. I've got pictures of it. Might have some around here somewhere. I've got pictures of that flight. And I happened to be in the front of the helicopter, and there was an extra set of headphones laying there. So I picked them up and put them on. As we were flying in, I could hear the aircraft. We had a couple of Apaches that were going on ahead to scout for us, a recon element. And I heard them call back on the radio and say, "Be advised, there are over 1,000 people on the ground." And we start looking around like, what? Like, are we about to get into a firefight with 1,000 people? Is this going to be like a Mogadishu moment? This is before Mogadishu took place, but you know what I mean. And so we were all like locked and loaded, ready to go. We came in and landed on the airfield, and we all rushed off the aircraft, ready to do business. And it turned out they were all civilians. They had heard that we were coming, and it was like a parade. I mean, the whole town came out to see us, and they brought their babies, and they wanted to, wanted us to kiss their babies. And there were people just crowding around us everywhere. But word quickly came down from our commanders, get these people off the airfield, get them away from us. Because if there's a bad guy in this crowd with a pistol or a grenade, our rules of engagement at that time would not have allowed us to shoot back. We would have had to just run away or stand there and die. Neither of those is a good option. So I was one of the only people that spoke any Spanish, and I got run ragged running around telling people, shoo, get away, go, get out, leave. And I was, it was hot. I was wearing body armor. It was like super heavy, and I was just sweating like crazy. And all of a sudden, I felt somebody grab me by the back of my blouse and jerk on the back of my shirt. And I whipped around with my rifle up and, was ready to, fight somebody. And there was a 5-year-old girl standing there with a Pepsi in a pretty pink dress. This little 5-year-old girl in a dress standing there with her big round eyes looking at me with a cold Pepsi. Her dad had the key to the Coke machine, and he had gone over and opened up the Coke machine and was handing Pepsis out to all the soldiers. And apparently he told his daughter, go over and give that poor guy a Pepsi. So it was one of the best Christmas gifts I ever received at that moment, I have to say. But it was like a commercial or something. Anyway, here in Gaza, so the crowdedness is becoming an issue. And so as the IDF, they have blocking positions on the roads, they have fighting positions set up, and they're taking and holding land as they go across. They're getting into more and more situations where they're confronted with large groups of people. And they do what they can to drive those people away. Sometimes they will fire up in the air to get people to disperse. And Hamas is just waiting for something like that, because the IDF starts shooting up in the air, Hamas starts shooting the people, and then immediately NPR starts reporting that the IDF is shooting people. So I'm not saying that the IDF has not shot any people. They have certainly shot quite a few. But there are rules. There's a process. These guys are not, this is not the Wild West. They don't get to just shoot everybody or shoot anybody they want. There have to be certain triggers that are tripped before the IDF gets a chance, has the right to shoot people. And if they shoot people without those triggers being tripped, then they will be prosecuted and they will go to jail. That's how you know you're dealing with a moral military rather than an immoral military. We're like an immoral military in Russia. They're capturing Ukrainian soldiers and dragging them to death behind motorcycles, or cutting off their body parts before they execute them in cold blood. These are war crimes, and they're not only tolerated by the commanders in Russia, they're encouraged. And there's proof of that. So that's how you know that you're dealing with an immoral military. In the Ukrainian military, there have been instances where Russian prisoners of war have been summarily shot, and the soldiers who did it were then prosecuted by Ukraine. That's how you know you have a moral military. So all I'm saying is, number one, it's disingenuous for NPR to report that Israel is murdering these people, because they're getting the number of casualties from Hamas, first of all. So we know that's inflated. Secondly, what NPR is not bothering to do is take time to explain to you that as the people get concentrated into a smaller and smaller area, Hamas takes advantage of that by shooting at IDF soldiers and causing these conflagrations and causing civilian deaths. Look, there's a very easy way to ensure that they don't have any more civilian deaths in Gaza if Hamas cares. That would be for them to lay down their arms, because this is one of those situations that if Hamas stops fighting, the war is over. If Israel stops fighting, Israel is over. Big difference. We have not found anybody who wants to take these two sweet dogs that somebody left with us. I want to mention that again. If you are in the market for a dog or two, if you have a farm or someplace and you're looking for a good dog that doesn't run, doesn't have to be chained up, that's good with kids, well trained, stays outside, and they're cute, they're real friendly. Somebody left their dogs at our house, we don't know who, and abandoned them. So we're trying to find homes for these dogs before we have to leave. And on that note, I'm leaving for Israel day after tomorrow, I guess. Maybe, is it tomorrow? What's today, the 1st? Yeah, something like that. Okay. I'll take the map off here. Let's just quickly, I want to move over to Lebanon. Oh, first of all, Trump said today in a press conference or meeting of some sort that he thinks there might be a possible ceasefire in Gaza as early as next week. Israel said, look, every time the U.S. comes up with a ceasefire idea, we're on board with it. It's Hamas that isn't. So Hamas just keeps saying, basically, the only way we'll agree to a ceasefire is if Israel completely leaves Gaza and leaves us in charge. Those things are non-starters. So it's not going to happen. Also in Lebanon, the United States has been pushing a deal to disarm Hezbollah by November. That means Hezbollah has to turn over its weapons to the Lebanese army. All of them. Missiles, rockets, small arms, explosives, everything. And has to cease being a military proxy of Iran. And they have to do that by November. And if they don't, the United States may levy pretty crushing sanctions on Lebanon. So they are encouraging Lebanon with a stick and saying, Lebanon, you better do something about this Hezbollah problem. We don't want it to come back and be a thorn in Israel's side again. All right, so we're not just talking about war, like conventional war between soldiers in Gaza or anywhere else. This is all full spectrum warfare. Cyber war, kinetic war, psychological war, information war. And it's all unfolding right now. We need to be educated about the tactics that the enemy is using. And when I say the enemy, it's not just the enemy of Israel. They are the enemy of the United States. And I want us to be clear about how they are trying to destroy you. Because in some sense, it's working. And that's a real concern. All right. We just went over an hour, so I'm going to end it there, folks. God bless you. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for being a part of the Hot Zone. Please do make sure you are subscribed to the channel. For some reason, people keep getting unsubscribed from the YouTube channel. I don't know why. But go check and make sure you're subscribed. And while you're over there, hit that like button. Go over to chuckholton.com and sign up over there as well and get a lot of extra content. So we'll see